Greetings and welcome to Conversations at the Intersection, a podcast where faith, justice, joy, and liberation meet. I am Reverend Kelli X. I'm the director of Racial Justice Ministries here at Spirit Bennett Center. And today I am honored to have an amazing woman uh, with me today to be interviewed. Her name is Cathy Carrillo. She is an organizer with the ReMIX Tennessee, a immigrants' rights organization who is doing the work of protecting our immigrant siblings. Cathy, thank you so much for joining me on today. The first thing I want to ask you is, what do you do and why do you do it?
Hmm. What do I do? I support my community in figuring out the best ways to find solutions to their everyday problems. I think as an organizer, I focus specifically on a lot of what has to do with immigrant rights at the intersection of a lot of different things. But our focus in the remix really is what are the things and changes that we can create right here at home. And what are the ways in which we can set up our community to help advocate for themselves, to create better systems, and to understand what's going on in the space. And why I do it actually goes back to my own personal story of me as a teenager and my own father being deported, and how I had to navigate those systems with my own family of having to become the interpreter, the legal expert, the person who helped understand everything that happened while also being a child. And
Mm.
how important faith, spirituality, um, and my church at the time, what role they played. And so um, later on in life, when I got further into organizing and community work, it was the faith spaces and the congregational spaces that invited me back into this work that I felt most comfortable in, and talking about what are the ways in which we are talking about how religion and faith and spirituality call us to this work, how we should
Yeah.
respond to each other, how we support each other.
Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing your story. Sometimes, so often, the reason that we do what we do is because of our own personal stories. But it can also be difficult to talk about why and how we end up here. Can you share the story of how the remix came to be and what inspired the work that is currently happening in Tennessee, particularly in Nashville?
Yeah, so back in 2018, a group of friends got together in someone's basement, and we started talking about how everything that was going on at the time, and how we wanted to respond as young people. It feels like it was years ago, so as young people then, what we could do on our end, what we saw wasn't happening, and how we wanted to fill those gaps. And so many of us had already been working in the immigrant justice space, and we had that knowledge, that experience. We just needed to be able to get into one space to flesh out all those creative ideas about
Mhm.
different ways to approach the system. And so from there, the Mix Nashville was born. The Mix Nashville was born. We held Migra Watch trainings. We held community defense trainings. We had over 580 people sign up to directly defend their neighbors. We supported over 10 families that had been directly affected, or sorry, over 40 families that had been directly affected by family separation. But most
Mm.
importantly, we were able to educate at least 10 incidents in which it didn't end up in that way. People got to know what their rights were, and they got to stay together as families. And that was really important to us, that families could stay together. From there, we pivoted, and during the pandemic, we raised over $60,000 that went straight back to our community. We passed out health education resources and COVID tests. Many people don't know that immigrants didn't receive any kind of stipend or support, even though they were the first line workers supporting
Wow.
all of our communities. They didn't receive any kind of that support. So we knew that it was important to get that to them. once the election happened this time around, it was the question of like, where do we go now? How do we refocus now? And so that's why we are now the ReMIX, because it is a new version of us in a space and sense in which we want the work that we are doing to be replicated. We want people to be able to take the templates and the ways in which we're moving and learn from it and build their own systems, because we know that we can't just be the only ones doing this work. I am very, very grateful and proud to the people who have supported us in this journey, but we are all volunteers. We are all working class people who are doing this work in this any spare time that we have, because we recognize the magnitude of what we're facing in this moment and how important it is to uplift to people that this isn't just something that nonprofits should be taking care of. This isn't just something that church leaders should be taking care of. This isn't something that politicians should be addressing. At the ReMIX, we have emphasized that we have done away with the language of directly affected folks and allied folks, because we don't believe in this space. We know that whatever affects me will affect you, and whatever affects you will affect me, and how important it is to understand that our fights are tied, and the same strategies that they have used to surveil, to attack, to try to criminalize other communities, they're using in our communities now. And it's not long before they will use it in other communities. We were sold this lie that individualism would keep us safe and would protect us, when in reality, that goes against the direct instinct of my community that is communal, that is supportive,
Yes.
is we need to rely on each other. And there's such an importance in that, of fighting and resisting every attempt to tell us that what comes naturally to us, the empathy, the care, the concern, the community work, is not the right way forward. And so, yeah, the ReMIX has been working diligently since literally the how I was like, within 48 hours of the election results, we jumped into action. Um, I'm really, really grateful, because at this moment, we have been able to support over 850 families to have their emergency preparedness packets, which means a power of attorney letter, know your rights, a bunch of legal forms, all for free. All volunteers jumped in and helped us. We have passed over 8,000 red cards out. And now we are taking on just another big task, which is helping support our neighbors through this really traumatic moment of what just happened on May 4th here in Nashville. And what are the ways in which we create and build systems and infrastructures that aren't just going to happen right now, but ways in which we can rely on each other for everything that is to come. I think that that is part of the devastating aspect of what happened yesterday, is that it is just the beginning.
Yeah.
And
You know, one of the
we
things that you mentioned was about knowing your rights. And I had the honor of attending one of your trainings that you know your right trainings that you did. Oh, I can't remember which Catholic church you did. The one in North Nashville. I'm not getting the name. And it was striking for me, because what it reminded me of is the work that September Clark did in the early 1900s, that mid 1900s moment of helping African Americans, one, learn to read, also to know their rights so that they could pass the test that needed to vote, be able to vote, but then also to know how to vote. Not just, well, and I'll put it this way, not just how to vote, like how to push a button or a lever or write a name, but really how to know and decode what candidates are saying, what's working for them, and so that they can choose candidates that really
I'm so
honor
sorry.
them. Oh,
Oh,
you're
I'm so
fine. But in this instance, you all are using a very similar system of really knowing what's happening, but different. And so I'm wondering, what does knowing your rights look like now in a place where the state and federal systems are actively targeting immigrant folks. And I know that they're saying we're looking for criminals or whatever that dehumanizing language is, but we've also seen not just here, but we've seen it in Tennessee and we've seen it throughout out the country, both doing the random stops like what happened May 4th here in Nashville, and targeting graduate students, start targeting students with visas. So people who are here legally, or people who they just automatically think that no one will care about based off of how they look. And so all of these different using these systems, and I'm wondering what does it look like when how do we within the systems, and then how does the ReMIX help communities claim power in those spaces?
Yeah, I think that the very beginning of the work from within the system is being willing to recognize that there are many of us that have that fear. Um,
Mm,
and I don't think that it means not acknowledging the fear. I think that it means understanding the fear and moving through it even though you're afraid. Because
ooh,
if you
that's
are
good.
working within the system, it is important to challenge and understand the limitations of the system and how we work through those challenges and limitations. I think
Mhm.
for our end, it has been demystifying what the system is, all the entry and exit points, all the ways in which you can uh, stop things like legislation, stop things like policies. I mean, we did it at the state and local level this year, right?
Mhm.
We
Right.
demystified what that state legislator looks like and how, yes, you as a citizen, as a resident of Tennessee, can come and speak at the state legislator and talk directly to the people making the decisions that affect your everyday life. You don't have to
Yes.
wait or think that it's only a lobbyist that can do it. You can go there and witness it and talk to them yourselves. At the local level, how important it is to hold the local leadership accountable for the things and the promises that they made during their campaign elections. How important it is to not just accept someone and what they said when they were trying to get elected, but then how are we
Mm,
following through on those policies once they are elected, and the ways in which we combated fusus and the license plate reader technology to help
yes.
really understand and emphasize that the city needs to understand that the concerns that community leaders had were very valid and real. And that is one of the reasons why now this administration has come forward and said, well, we're not going to move forward with something like that. It's, well, yes, you should have relied and listened to community leaders who were telling you that these were deep concerns for people who were on the marginalized areas of our community, right? And so
Mhm.
for us, demystifying the system, amplifying that accountability to local leadership, and holding that and saying, we are the people who have made these folks powerful, and we have the opportunity to hold them accountable for the things, the decisions that they're making at the state level and the decisions that they're making at the local level and the actions they are or are not willing to take here at the
Mhm.
local level as well, right? I think um I'll just say I'm really disappointed in a lot of the local leadership response to what happened yesterday. Um, on site, and we were asking local leaders to join us, and I think only like two or three council members showed up to witness what was happening. um, the statements that are coming from the administration are very minimal and not willing to take accountability about what actually happened. Police once again stating that they're there for crowd control, right? Because of a
Mm,
protest. In reality, our organizers have proof that they were there before any kind of crowd arrived,
sure.
before
Yeah.
anything ever happened. And the city's lack of wanting to take accountability for that.
Mhm.
Um, and not wanting to respond as to what role did they play, whether that was a role of direct collaboration, whether that was a role of just compliance or whether that was a role of like you knew something and you didn't say anything. There is a
Yeah.
deep mistrust in these spaces, and we cannot begin to rebuild them until there's an acknowledgement of where they have failed to support and think about think about the
Hmm.
safety of immigrant communities. Because if we're going to talk about prioritizing safety, then we should be making sure that Nashville is actually safe
Right.
for
Yeah.
everyone, not just the ones that you think or deem
Correct. And I
good
think
enough.
also part of that, I'm thinking about the safety piece of how, in many ways, Black and Brown people are often pitted against each other. And these narratives around crime, about migration, safety, about jobs, who's taking whose job belongs, what, all of those type of things. And and some of that is very much so built. Not some of it. Most of it is very much so built around this white supremacist ideation, ideas about who deserves to be where and when. And I'm wondering, how can we build deeper solidarity across communities that are both targeted by these systems, and also being able to be honest about the rhetoric that we've heard that's supposed to separate us when we're both dealing with, honestly, unjust laws, unjust systems, and they're kind of all bleed and in many ways what it is a setup so that we can freeze and not and feel like we're hopeless in this process. Can you speak to that?
I think
I
one of
know
the
I said a
best,
lot.
no, no, no. I think one of the best examples to me is was the campaign about the community oversight board and the deep work that we had to do in helping our community understand that criminality is used as a tool to separate Black and Brown communities
Yes.
and to point the finger and say they're the person responsible for you not being able to do well. And so I think that part of deconstructing the lies that we have been told is understanding the ways in which the same systems are used against both of us, right? Both communities, right? For
Mm-hmm.
license plate readers and for surveillance technology, people are like, oh, well, this will combat crime. This will combat crime. It's actually going to be used to surveil you more. And we know that because of where the license plate readers were placed. They weren't placed in the affluent white communities.
They
They
were
were placed
not.
definitely in the Black and Brown communities. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's already leading with that rhetoric that, oh, these are the communities that are unsafe. When in reality, those are the communities that are more tight knit, that they have better communication amongst themselves, but they're claiming, oh, that's where this is coming from, right? And so I think being able to acknowledge that the things that they move forward are going to come with this lens of like, oh, it'll benefit you. But unless we can remove ourselves and say, okay, how is it benefiting me? But how is it hurting others? We
Yes.
can't get into deeper conversation. And also being able to recognize the internalized racism, the colorism, because that's a really
Mm-hmm.
huge in my community too, right? Of like what are the ways in which we are othering each other right now. One of the things that I say to folks constantly is criminality right now in the state of Tennessee, if you are undocumented, you cannot obtain a driver's license. And so if you are driving your child to school, if you are going to church, you are committing a crime. So don't start using this language of like, oh, well, they're going after the criminals. The state will find a way in which to declare that you are a criminal, whether
Say
it's
it.
of your immigration status, whether it's because of your skin color, whether it's because of your sexuality or who you choose to love. It will find a
Mhm.
way in which to criminalize you. So the second that you sign on to that criminal language, you are ultimately going to put yourself in that same category. And we've seen it, right? They're trying to do away with the DEI. They're trying to do
Yes.
away with they're trying to do they're trying to do with the Tennessee Human Rights
Commission.
Commission,
Mhm.
right? Which was one of the biggest reasons why we were able to gain so much ground for Black and Brown communities in this
Mhm.
state, right? Um, and that's intentional. And we have to understand that it's not just one thing or another, it's all tied. I was heartbroken at hearing that there was a registry for undocumented people. And then I was devastated by hearing that there's an attempt to create one for autistic children,
Exactly. Hmm.
right?
And we know
That
how registries have been used throughout history in the past.
and the
Yes.
methods that they use against one group, they are
Hmm.
honing to understand how to use against another. And so if
Hmm.
your limitation is like, well, they voted for them, well, that's their problem, well, that's their community. No, because ultimately the tactics that are used there will be used here. And I have to mention that so much of ICE surveillance technology has been used in the genocide against Palestinian people.
Hmm.
And how important it is to
Hmm.
understand that those are
Right.
the same tactics that are now coming home and being used here.
Mhm.
This
And so,
workaround.
as you talk about how these unjust systems and thus our unjust laws are being used to oppress and in some places destroy communities, how can you help communities? How can we help communities discern when to comply and when to resist? Are there times when you need to acquiesce or and what does that look like? But also, what does resistance look like in the face of such brutality that is done with a smile on the face, right? Because it's that this is happening. It keeps saying protection and safety, and we're not trying to harm anybody while tearing apart families. And you also spoke to it because, and the reason why I'm asking about the resistance is if you're going for undocumented people, but you're also finding ways to have people who are here legally, who are documented, who have the things that are there, and finding ways to then unvalidate their legal status. And if you can unvalidate their legal status, what can happen to those who are naturalized citizens, and to be very honest, those who are birthright citizenship, as we might call it, the top of the tier citizenship, like those possibilities, if you can figure it out, we can keep figuring it out all the way to the top, right? And so, what does resistance look like in that space?
I wanna touch on this last thing that you just mentioned because I want folks to understand birthright citizenship is now being heard in
Correct.
court. Heard.
Mhm.
Right? Like
At-
we're allowing there to be a legal argument as to why birthright citizenship should not exist, right? Because it was
mhm.
only valid for the people who came over who were the right skin color, but now it's not going to be valid anymore, right? That's what they're attempting to do. And so I don't think that this is like far-fetched or anything in that sense. And I want people to understand that there's this book and it's escaping my name right now, but the first rule of combating tyranny is do not comply in advance. There are constitutional rights. There are things and checks and balances that we should be ensuring are happening, that we should be ensuring that they have every opportunity to work out the way that they were set to work out. Do not comply in advance. We
Mhm.
cannot just accept what it is. Not everything legal is right.
That's right.
I learned that from one of my previous bosses, Davy Tucker, right? Not everything legal is right. Not everything in this system is okay to happen the way that it's supposed to happen. And so I think to that, my call is like understand and learn what are the things that are meant to support us, what are the things that are meant to protect us, and defend those institutions, defend those processes, call for every aspect, call for every play in that book to be done before we arrive at that final aspect. Because right now there's so many things that we're just like rolling over and accepting without saying no, that's not a law yet. No, this is my constitutional right. No, like you can say no. And that is you complying because it's you upholding the systems that people fought so hard to protect and fought so hard to get here. And you wanted me to follow them. So now make sure you're protecting them.
Mm.
Make sure you're protecting them, right? I think about that all the time of like, one of my other mentors said, law is meant to be interpreted. Law is meant to be interpreted. Law is meant to be changed. Just because
Mhm.
something is doesn't mean that's how it should be or that it will be all the time. And so I think I welcome people to learn those constitutional values deeply and to
Mhm.
defend those things. You want to talk about love for a country, then defend the very same values that those countries were founded upon, which is immigration,
Yes.
freedom of speech, and due process,
Mm.
right? Those were the values. Make sure you're not just defending them when they're convenient to you, but defending them, especially now that they're being used or not being used, they're being done away with in order to attack all of us.
That's true. So much of Tennessee is shaped by Christian identity. How do you respond to people who use their Christianity to justify anti-immigrant policies?
I think, oh my goodness, there is so many
Yeah.
references that I could make to the Bible that I'm like, are we reading the same book?
I
Are
was gonna
we on the same page? Because I feel like if we were reading the same book, uh, maybe we just need a national book club. I don't know. I feel that my deepest concern for them would be, what is your relationship to? Is your relationship to God, or is your relationship to the idols who have been placed in front of you that say they are speaking on behalf of God's name?
Ooh, now you're preaching.
Because I think that that's what's happening. We are
Mhm.
not reading the word, we are not accepting the messages. um, I remember my Sunday school lessons. I remember the very basic things of the commandments and the golden rule, and like treat others as you would have them treat you. And I'm just like, these were the things you ingrained in me.
Yeah.
These were the teachings of love, of compassion, of grace, of forgiveness, of clothing those who need to be clothed, of feeding those who need to be fed, housing those who need to be housed. And now you're looking at me and telling me I'm wrong. Now you're looking at
Yeah.
me and telling me, but not that skin color. But ask for a paper first. Because,
Mhm.
of
Mhm.
course, Jesus, before he fed the loaves and fishes of bread, made sure that that person had a social security number, right?
Be
Like
clear.
that wasn't what happened. That wasn't the case. And so, how important it is to be clear and to remind each other about what the lessons were within these spiritual messages of what we were called to do. And
Mhm.
are you listening to those lessons? Or are you listening to the people who are benefiting off of a spotlight moment of hatred and bigotry?
Mm.
I think
That's
that
good.
that is the question I would ask those folks that are using Christianity to defend everything that's happening right now. to deeply evaluate what is that relationship. Is it a relationship to God, or is it a relationship to those idols?
Yeah, and to tyranny. And what are we? Is this about liberation? Because I think about my Christian faith as a faith of liberation, a faith that allows for folks to live and be freer, and that everlasting life is not something that happens on the other side, but right now that we could live life and it be life giving, as opposed to supporting empire and destruction. So throughout this interview, we've alluded to the activity of ICE being in Nashville on May 4th of 2025. And I would like for you to really talk about your reaction to um, what Mayor O'Connell and Chief Drake have said in the past about not being willing to work with ICE or do all of that. And now, as we look at what's happened this weekend, um, in light of that, can you talk about what happened and how, and your reactions to our local government's presence, lack of presence, or statement, vagueness, and all of that?
Yeah. Um, on May 4th, around 2 in the morning, we began to receive reports that people were being stopped in several different areas: Murfreesboro, Thompson Lane, Antioch Pike. It has since been confirmed that the Tennessee Highway Patrol conducted an operation with ICE officials in order to stop people between those times. There were people leaving work. There were people who were leaving and getting groceries or getting something for their family members. There was one person going to a pharmacy. Um, there were several people who were just going about their lives, people coming home from family celebrations, birthday celebrations. There are people who were living their lives who were stopped in this one moment and not just questioned whether or not they had a valid driver's license, but also immediately asked whether they were criminals, whether they had any kind of tattoos, which we know that that tattoo rhetoric has jumped around into being used to target people. Um, from that moment, community organizers started mobilizing to try to figure out what the magnitude of it was. We weren't sure um, how many people had been arrested, and so we mobilized as much as we could. We went to the Brick Church Pike office to try to see if we could see any kind of movement there. And what we did notice were that there were several ICE vans, that there were several ICE vehicles, and then we also noticed that MNPD had arrived, that there were about 3 or 4 vehicles that had pulled into that office. And it was just 3 volunteers who were watching the space, and they weren't
Mhm.
doing anything or anything like that. So this statement that MNPD had no role in the process when they were present and they did have information feels very disingenuous. Um, and this statement released by Mayor Connell that safety is a priority when community leaders have been warning him about this kind of activity for months feels really disingenuous and false. And the fact that there were hundreds of hours put into fighting policies that his administration was supporting because we could see something like this happening in the future feels really heartbreaking.
Mhm.
We, many of us moved forward with supporting administrations and leaders because we have a deep trust in the people that they are or were and how they would be able to help respond to community members. And so I think for many of the folks, especially our immigrant community who helped elect some of these officials, have felt heartbroken by their inaction and by their
Mhm.
inability to hold themselves accountable, by their inability to just say sorry. Um,
Mhm.
they want us to continue moving forward in good faith and with good intentions, when you have just ignored the fear and the calls for action for months. You have ignored the calls for actions for months. There have been people in your inbox, in your email, speaking to members of your administration for months, letting you know about these things, and yet you refused to do anything. You told council members that many of our concerns were paranoid, and many of our concerns were something that they shouldn't be listening to because it's not reality. Well, here it is.
Mhm.
In reality, we're in the midst of the thing we warned you about. And even still, your response was, we had no role. You had a role. You had a role for months. You could have prepared this city to be set up in a better way, to have had better protocols, to have had better systems in which we could warn people, in which we could protect people, in which we could prepare people. That was your role. Your role,
Mhm.
your inaction and in your silence that got us to where we are now. Are you, as a community member, also taking part of that role?
Mhm.
Because doing nothing is also taking some kind of action. Ignoring is also taking some kind of action. Not accepting a call is also
An
taking some kind
action.
of action. And I
Yeah.
think for those reasons, we are really disappointed in both the mayor and the chief. I think there are actionable steps that they can take now. We need the names of all of the people that were taken so that we can help those family members get connected, so that we can help those family members understand what is the gravity of these things. We need to understand what MNPD's any kind of role that they had, whether that
Mhm.
they were informed, whether they were not informed, what time those calls took place, all of those things. So there can be true transparency about police activity. This is why the review board was so necessary. This is why that we voted as citizens, was so that we could have this level of transparency, and now we don't have it. So how are you going to give power back to the community review board so that they do have the ability to support, especially in instances like this? How are you creating those foundations of trust for us to be able to have? And then how are you uplifting these families? How are you ensuring that this doesn't happen again? What is your stance against it? And I'm sorry, but if you are too afraid to say that you stand with immigrant communities and these are the actionable steps that you are willing to take, then you shouldn't be in leadership.
Mhm. That's a strong stance, a powerful stance. I think that so often people are fearing of doing the wrong thing that we do nothing. We see it happening. We get caught up in, well, this is the law, not the law. We start negotiating within our heads, and we often find ourselves not acting, or not feeling like our actions can really have any power. I'm wondering, um, what can we do? How can we act? What would be the best next steps for community members, whether we are citizens or residents or whatever that looks like? Because we're all impacted. Because when what happens to my neighbor happens to me, and so what can we do to make this a better space?
So I think right off the top of my head is that you can talk to your neighbor. I think oftentimes we don't even know the first name of our neighbor. Maybe we say hi, maybe like, oh, it's a pretty day, but we actually haven't formulated a relationship with them. So go introduce yourself. Use Google Translate, right? Go to that grocery store you go to all the time, that restaurant you go to all the time, those spaces that you go to time, those workers you see all the time, and introduce yourself. I think right now our community is trying to find a place and space where anywhere is safe, who is safe. And so go do that. Make that first step of That is your action. I'm not going to sit here and be fearful of doing the wrong thing. So I will connect with the person that needs me so that when that time comes, I know what the right thing is to do. Go make that connection. Be willing to have that connection and understand each other and get to know each other. You can download red cards. Red cards are cards that hold constitutional rights on the front and phrases that you can say to federal agents on the back. They are not just for
Oh,
undocumented people, they are for people of all, whether you are undocumented, whether you're a citizen, whether you're a resident. So go download red cards and go pass them out in your neighborhood. Go pass them out at the restaurants or whatever it may be. We need people to know their constitutional rights. You memorize them. Make sure your friends and neighbors memorize them. And then I think, as far as the ReMIX goes, we have a mutual aid fund. It's called Nashville Unidos, which means Nashville United. Nashville Unidos Fund is live now. You can donate. 100% of that money is going straight back to the families that were directly affected. So we're going to be supporting them. Oftentimes, when people are directly affected by family separation, the first thing that comes to mind is, especially if a main provider was taken, what bills will need to be paid. How are they going to be able to feed themselves? How are they going to be able to transport themselves? So that fund will help meet all of those needs for people. And then lastly, you can contact the governor, you can contact your state representative, you can contact the mayor, and you can contact your council members and ask them what steps are they taking to protect these community members. Right now, there is a law that is about to be signed by Governor Lee, that would could put a lot of the work that immigrant rights organizations are doing at risk. We need him to veto that law. As far as Nashville specifically goes, you can reach out to Mayor O'Connell and the council members and ask them to what was MNPD's role in this space and what steps are they going to take to make sure that there are some kind of protections, some kind of
mhm.
program, some kind of system that'll help keep our immigrant folks safe. So I think those are some steps where you can start. As always, we welcome you at the ReMIX. If you have that space in place of wanting to get involved, you can follow us on Facebook or Instagram in order to do that. And also, make your own spaces as well, right? With your own church, with your own faith group, with your own congregation team. Create those spaces because we're going to need a lot more of us in order to confront everything else that is to come.
Yes. So, despite everything that is happening in this moment, the truth is that your work centers on empowerment and hope. What's keeping you going, and what gives you joy in the midst of the struggle? I know I'm going to just say this real quick. Like there's a within the Black community right now, we are line dancing. We're still organizing. We're still working. We're still pushing, but we're also line dancing. We've got our fans. We know and our boots are on the ground, both doing the work and dancing. So, what's giving you joy in the midst of all of this, Kathy?
Yeah. Um, I apologize if I get emotional saying this.
It's okay.
One of the After one of our Know Your Rights workshops that we held, there was a father who came up to us and said, if I left everything that I love, and if I left everyone that I know to come to a country where I didn't know the language, where I knew no one, and I built my family and my home here, how
Yeah.
could I not stay and fight?
Ooh.
Um, that is what motivates me, is that
Mm.
I am the product
Yes.
of someone's wildest dreams.
Mm-hmm.
I am the product of courageous women taking chances.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that all of the people around me are products of that too. And I'm so
Yes, we
incredibly proud of the work that they have
are.
done and the work that they continue to do despite life, despite the system, despite personal everything, they continue to show up. And I think that the most recent way that I've seen that is joy in dancing and joy in music and how
Mm-hmm.
beautiful it can be to be in a space with people that you love and trust and can joke and can sing and can dance and can resist and say, this is home. And so, because it's home, I'm going to fight like hell.
That is so good. That is so beautiful. I am so thankful for you trusting us, trusting this space to be able to share this story, and trusting us not just to listen, but to get to work, to get our red cards, to talk to our neighbors, to make sure that we don't give up rights um, at the cost of saying we're following the law, but recognizing that the law is to be interpreted in the same way that our faith is to be interpreted. That we interpret our faith in a way that is liberating and spreads joy and allows for people to live full, beloved lives and in community. So I am so thankful. Can you tell us one more time where they can find you in the ReMIX and get involved?
Yeah, so the ReMIX Tennessee, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram. All of our links are on our pages on our link tree. So the ReMIX Tennessee. And then for our Migra Watch hotline, that number is 615-933-8409. If you live in Nashville and think that you see some suspected activity, we have volunteers that help support with that. But yes, follow us on Facebook and Instagram.
Thank you again, and thank you to everyone for joining me for another episode of Conversations at the Intersection here at Scarrett Bennett Center. I am so honored to have had you here where faith, justice, joy, and identity meet. You have a wonderful and lovely rest of your day.